sales track. Today, you're going to be joining us for some DISC training featuring the amazing Dr. Michael Abelson. My name is Candace Garcia. I am with the Agent Development Team. I am a staff instructor here with EXP University. I have some teammates here who are going to be assisting me today. So if you're looking for a different session, another track, or anything schedule related, you can always ask your question in the chat box. Hold on, Doctor, I'm going to mute your mic really quickly, and then I'm going to ask you to open it back up before the session starts. So really quickly, just to put you on mute there. All right, guys. So as I said, I'm here today with some of my teammates. We're going to be here to offer assistance. If there's anything that you need related to shareholders, let us know in that chat box in the bottom left-hand corner. You also have an icon on the upper right-hand corner of your world screen. You should all see it there. It says shareholders. If you have any questions about our agenda or about any of the sessions taking place today, go ahead and click on that box. All right, before we get started, I want to make sure to direct everyone's attention up to the slide on the screen behind me. We're going to quickly go over some of the housekeeping items for the day. Just want to make sure everybody leaves their microphones on mute for the duration of this session. You should have that red Ghostbuster sign going through your mic in the bottom left-hand corner. If you've got questions, feel free to throw them in the chat box, and then we will cover them at the very end. We'll set aside some time for Q&A. If you are having trouble with your mic, if you're not able to hear, you can always try exiting the world and coming back in. That should reset your mic functions. If not, try leaving the world altogether, not just the room, and coming back in. You can also try listening in via our mobile app. If you continue to have issues, we will ask you to go over to our tech support tech outpost to see about getting your volume fixed. Dr. A will have some slides we'll be presenting today. So if you want to make sure to see those slides, utilize the screen zoom function at the very top of your screen here in the world, or at the very bottom of your screen, you should see a stage zoom function there as well. So click there to see these slides up close and personal. We won't be posting a link to the slides in the chat box, so you will need to watch behind us. All right, Dr. A, I'm ready to turn it over to you, but before I do, I just want to thank you so much for hosting this breakout and for coming in and joining us here in EXP World. We are so honored to have you. Want to let you know that you're not alone. I will be here running these slides for you. So if you have any questions or if there are any tech issues, I'm right here for you. All right, folks, are you ready to go? Give me a thumbs up if you're ready to go. Dr. A, just make sure to unmute your mic in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, and then you can take it over, sir. All right, there you go. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Michael Abelson.
Thank you, Candace. Really appreciate it. I'm psyched about being here with everybody today. It's been interesting to watch EXP as it's grown. For those of you who don't know who I am or know much about me, I've been involved with the industry since 1983 and been working with a lot of different real estate companies. And we won't get into that because the session today is not about me, it's about you guys. And I have several things that I've got in store for us. One of them is to talk about the DISC so you can understand what DIS and C is. One of the interesting things or neat things about this afternoon is there's this session where we're going to talk about DISC. And we have a session immediately after this where we're actually going to look at how to use DISC when you're doing your listing presentation. So Don Hobbs is going to be joining us for that session, and we have Shannon, who's going to be joining us for that session. So that is going to be an awesome session where we're going to be applying a lot of these concepts when it comes to how to actually get the listing and close the listing and interact with your listing person. One of the neat things about DISC is it can be used with people anywhere for any reason. All right. So anything we talk about today, you can use it with your spouse, you can use it with your friends, you can use it with your kids, you can use it with your staff or people that you work with. It's really cool because DISC is this. Now, one of the questions was, what is DISC? Well, DISC is a behavioral profile. And what we do is we look at 4 basic styles. D stands for dominance, I stands for influencer, S stands for steadiness, and C stands for compliance. And what I'm going to do today is give you an overview of what they are, but I'm also going to be spending time on how to look at this from your agent's perspective, from your client perspective, okay, your buyers and sellers perspective, but I'm going to be focusing more on how to deal with this in stressful times, because we're all experiencing stress right now. So the other aspect of this is not just COVID-19 stress, but when you're in a listing presentation or when you're interacting with somebody who wants to buy a house, they may also be experiencing some stress. So it's important to understand how the different styles look at stress. Right now, I've been doing this for a little while now. A little over 20 years. We sold over 500,000 assessments. So I'm open to questions, and I'm really excited about doing the questions. I'm going to try and answer them near the end so we can get through the basic concepts of this. But if you have questions, for sure, put them in the chat box. All right, let's get started. All right, Candace, can you put up the first screen there? Thank you very much. All right, now, what I like to do is I like to make this come real by having you look at this, and if we're talking about things, visualize somebody in your own life, okay, that really exemplifies or is a great example for the concept. Why? Because that way you don't have to memorize anything. All you have to do is think about somebody in your life that is like this individual. So what I've done with all 4 of the different areas, I've identified some pretty well-known characters. And we have 2 for each one of the different areas. So let's get rolling with the D, or dominance. And who I've chosen for these is Margaret Thatcher, who used to be known as the Iron Lady when she was alive. She was the first Prime Minister of Great Britain, first woman Prime Minister, and she was Prime Minister for 11 years. An awesome, awesome lady. Right? And then we have Matt Damon, and I like to use Matt Damon especially for his movies with Jason Bourne, because he is an action direct type of guy. So what we see with these is they're direct, they're decisive, they're daring, they like to take risks, they like to direct other people, they can be demanding, they can also be controlling, right? And they have a desire to work for results. And sometimes this gets in the way, and sometimes it doesn't, okay? Now, regarding the overheads, I don't have a problem with you taking, a snapshot of them, so you can see them. All right, but I've made them, fairly large to make it a little bit easier for you to do that. So let's get started with the next aspect of this, and that is what stresses these out. Okay, and I want to focus on a couple of things. So just go to the next slide, Candace. As far as what stresses these out, and there's 2 main things that stress these out, right? One of them is not being in control. So you can write these down, right? The other one is not winning. These have this desire to win. Yeah, I can't see anything either. So, and I just see that the audio is skipping for some people. Sorry about that if that's from my side. I'm not sure if it is or not. Okay, all right. Now, again, what are the main issues for these as far as what stresses them out? They need to be in control. They want to be in control. Now, what's going on right now with COVID-19? What's going on when you're in a listing presentation or you're driving somebody around and showing somebody properties? They're not in control. So what you need to do is you need to focus on how you can make them feel more comfortable so they can feel more in control. All right. So they don't like to have constraints regarding them moving around. Okay. And one of the other things is, and this is really helpful also with your buyers and sellers and anybody else, is they like to be communicated with. Okay. Are we having trouble, Candace, with the overheads?
No, we look good.
There we go. Okay, cool. All right. I have to control these things. Candace, can you go back to the previous slide, or was that what the problem was?
There we go. What stresses you?
Cool. All right. Fantastic. All right. So we see here that D's don't like when somebody is constraining their movement. All right. Right. They don't like when they can't take action, and they don't like it when people aren't communicating. So again, one of the things you want to do with the D is to make sure that you communicate with them. All right. Let's go to the next one, Candace. All right. So we see what stresses them out. Now, how do they behave under stress? Well, they become even more decisive and directive and demanding, right? And they can be insensitive to other people. So they might not be able to hear you, really clearly, all right? and because they're not necessarily listening to you, they might yell, okay, and they might just have this fear of being out of control. Let's look at current day, and what do we see with our politicians? All right, most of them are fairly intense deeds. So what we see are these people are really getting on each other. They're more decisive. They're more demanding of each other. And sometimes they're not listening very well. So people that are intense Ds have that difficulty sometimes as far as what they need to do and keep an eye on. Now, let's go to the next slide. I'm not going to be going over everything in the slides. It's just too much information and it'd be too boring for everybody. So I'm just going to focus on some important aspects. So let's go to the next slide. And what we see here are some things that you can do to decrease the stress. So if it's yourself, go out and exercise. Take a walk around the block, all right? Some of you have athletic equipment in your facility, okay, in your house, or maybe you live in a condo or something like that. Just do something to exercise. One of the other things you do is just get up in a room and stretch. Keep in mind that when you're working with your client, whether they're the buyer or the seller, right, they also need to have this exercise, right? Yeah, I see there's no slide again. I'm sure Candace will get this under control.
Yep, guys, there are slides. You're just going to need to utilize the screen zoom and refresh features. If you're not seeing the slides, you can try exiting the auditorium and hopping back in, but they are here and they are working.
Okay, thanks, Candace. All right, so one of the things is they want to do the exercise and you need to exercise yourself, okay? One of the other things is work on things that are within your control. Work with things that are within the home buyers or sellers' control, all right? They might be interested in a certain aspect of the house. Let them know that, well, this house might not have it, but this next one does, okay? So what you want to do is you want to spend time, okay, focusing on helping them regain control about what's going on, okay? Another aspect, another thing that you can do is you can just leave, okay? What happens sometimes with intense Ds, especially when there's two of you, what'll happen is they're kind of like two rams butting heads. Well, don't get into that situation because then somebody's going to get bloodied and hopefully it's not you. So what you want to do is you might want to say, hey, you know, let's just revisit this at another time. Now, some people will look at that as that's something that demonstrates a weakness, but in reality, it helps you get composure, all right? So what you want to do is you want to do what you can do to just reprioritize, come back, and then you'll feel more in control of that, about what's going on, all right? Again, so exercise, do things that you have control over, okay, as well as leave for an instant or leave for a little while, reprioritize, and then come back. All right, Candace, let's go in and talk about the next different basic behavioral style. And that's the I, or the influencer. And I love to use Jim Carrey for this because he is so, he's so emotional, enthusiastic. Just think of the roles that he's in, like The Mask, or where he was in Batman Forever, or Ace Ventura. He's always this high energy, very enthusiastic type of individual. So one of the things you want to do is you want to think in your mind, who is that type of individual as well? Dolly Parton also, you know, if you've ever seen her perform, very high energy, all right? So what happens a lot of times is you have these really high energy people. So what stresses the I out? Well, one of the things that stresses the I out is a lack of emotional bonding or the ability to interact with others. And man, is that going on with COVID-19? I mean, how many of you have been involved in going to the bar or having a drink with a friend via Zoom or some other, or GoToMeeting or some other technology? People are doing that all the time. I know Don Hobbs is having groups meet, and he actually has a bar scene behind him. So one of the things that he does is he has get-togethers like that. I've been doing that as well. It's really cool because what happens, the high I wants to be there. Now, you're not going to get the high C in that room, right? But you will get the high I in that room because they feel the necessity to do that, right? Another interesting thing about the high I is they get stressed, right, if they're not liked and if they're alone and if they're not able to talk with others. Again, if we're going to look at our buyers and sellers, what they want is they want you to interacting with them. That doesn't mean you need to be talking all the time. That means that you need to be interacting with them. So you want to ask them questions. You want to get into their space so they can feel in control of what's going on and interact with you. All right. So these are the things that stress out the intense I. Now, how do they behave when this happens? Well, it's interesting. I noticed that when Candace was asking what your behavioral style is, there are a lot of you that are high I's. And I know when I walk into some real estate agents' offices that are high I's, which are when they have things all over their office. Okay. And what happens is they're somewhat disorganized, but they don't want to admit that they're disorganized. They're very optimistic as well, right? So what do they say? Well, I know where everything is, but don't test them and don't ask them to identify that for you, especially if it's one of your buyers and sellers, because you don't want to embarrass them. But one of the things that you realize is that they're disorganized. Also, and this is kind of interesting and paradoxical, high I's, right, when they're really stressed, may feel sad. So you may be talking to a friend now, especially with COVID-19, as far as what's going on with that, and they're feeling sad, and this is really shocking you because they're so optimistic, they're so upbeat all the time, right? So what do you want to do? We'll get into that in minutes as far as what you should do. Another thing that happens with a high I, and to some extent you can use this to your advantage when you're selling a home with them, is they can act impulsively. I have a friend. Yes, I do have a friend other than Don. And I remember him telling me a story several years ago where he went into a BMW dealership and he was he'd been fairly successful. And he decided to drive home that day with a 750i. Unfortunately, he didn't tell his wife that he was going to be buying a 750i, which is a pretty expensive car, even in those days. And he comes back and he drives up into the driveway, and his wife comes out to meet him and saying, "Hey, dear, what's going on?" And he said, "Well, sweetheart, I was at the car dealer just walking around, and this car, I just love this car. It was just fantastic. All right, so I bought it." Well, I don't want to go into much of what happened after that, but you can just imagine the car was soon back at the dealership, and there were some other interesting dynamics going in the household, but it's not that unusual for high I or an intense I to be really, really impulsive on things. And you know what? The supermarkets love the high I. Why? Because they put all this impulsive buy stuff at the checkout as you're waiting to check out and hoping that you buy some of this high impulse stuff. Toy stores love to do that too. What do? They put stuff down low that the kids can reach. So when the kids are walking around the toy store with the family, right, or the parents, what do? They reach for stuff, and the parents start to feel guilty because they're not buying for the kid. All right. Now, let's go to the next slide. And what can the I do to decrease the stress? All right. Well, one of the things that high I do, and one of the things that that you can there you go. One of the things that you can do is to help the high I is interact with them. All right. Yeah, we're gonna skip that one slide, Candace. We're going to go to this one. You're going to interact. You're going to interact with that. Okay. And a lot of times you can tell whether that's the type of person they are, right? Because they like to go to Facebook a lot, right? And until times, those are the things they're going to do. Also, what you want to do is you want to do things or help them do things that are fun for them. So if it's one of your buyers and sellers, try to identify those things that they really like to do. You can ask them what they like to do for enjoyment. All right. Some people, like to drive around and see homes, even though that might not be your preference, because you want to sell on the internet. That's much more cost effective and time effective for you to do that. All right. Also, what happens is ask them questions, get them talking. One of the tricks of getting people to like you is for them to do more of the talking. When you're interviewing somebody, when you're interacting with them in the listing presentation, what you want to do is you want to ask them questions especially a high I, and get them to talk. Because the reality of it is, research has shown that the person who talks the most is the one who feels the best about the interaction. So these are things that you can do no matter what's going on in the relationship or what you're doing with that individual. All right, let's move on. I'm looking to see if there's any questions, but let's move on to the S behavioral style, and let's see who we have here. Well, there's two people that I picked here. One person is John Denver, and the other one is Barbara Bush. I actually had the opportunity of meeting Barbara Bush one time. I taught at Texas A&M University for a little over 30 years, and George Bush's library is there. I actually did a strategic plan for the library, and I had a chance to meet the two of them. And she recently died. She's a lovely, lovely lady, but she just exemplifies all of these different aspects of an intense S. And again, think of somebody in your world that exemplifies these different aspects. All right. They are very, very steady. And she is a calming effect in the entire Bush family. All right. They're also very sincere. They bring stability. They're good listeners. And I'm just going over the main features, of Mrs. Bush. Okay. They're very patient, and they're team players. It's important, for them to have a team. So what happens with that is we have all these different aspects of what is an intense S. And think about somebody who's an intense S. So what happens when they're stressed? All right, Candace, let's go to the next slide. There's two main issues that are frustrating or upsetting for an intense S. One of them is they don't like to be put in embarrassing situations. Performance evaluation can be an embarrassing situation. They're not going to be the best people to give your listing presentation if they haven't practiced it a lot. Okay. Also, they don't like change, especially if it's a surprise. With your buyers and sellers, you don't want there to be surprises. All right. You want to make sure that they're feel comfortable with what's going on. One of the things that you want to do with an intense S, you want to say at the beginning of the presentation or when you're first working with them, this is what we're going to do, and then take them through the steps. They like to know the process so they know what to expect, right? And you can ask me questions at any time. Might be the way you want to do it, or you might say, ask me questions at the end, right? Specify things, right? Also, specifics. They don't like to be evaluated in public. Here we have this gal who has to be speaking in public with a microphone. She's nervous as all get out. You probably can't see it because intense S's don't show their emotions, but they are just as emotional as everybody else is. All right. Also, they don't like to deal with confrontation. They don't like that. They'll shy from that. And what will happen is they will actually become more introverted. Okay. And more internalized. And another aspect is they're not necessarily, when the S comes out, and some of you have S, even though you might be an intense D or I, you might have some S as well, you might have some C as well, all right? They don't like to discipline others. So what happens sometimes is these intense S's will shy away from giving constructive criticism or giving criticism to anybody, whether it be a buyer or seller, whether somebody they're working with, or whether it's somebody that is in their family. So they might not be really good with discipline with their kids. Now, you may have grown up in a household where one of your parents was an intense S, and you were able to get away with murder because they didn't discipline you. All you had to do was go to them if they were an intense S or intense I. All you had to do is go and ask, and they would most likely say yes, because the I likes to be liked, and the S doesn't like to have confrontation. All right, so let's move on. And how does the S behave when they're really under stress? Okay, so what's going to happen in that type of situation? In the next slide, what we see is they become even more quiet, and they internalize things. They look within themselves. Okay, and one of the things that is an outcome of this is they might be even more agreeable than usual. Again, when you're doing this with a listing and a buyer, or a buyer, one of the things that you want to do is you want to make sure that you don't embarrass them, right? And you want to make sure that you let them realize, especially with the S's, that they're not going to show you the emotion. So if you think they might be experiencing some type of emotion, what you want to do is you want to ask them, what's going on for you now? How are you feeling about what we just talked about? And ask them in a non-threatening way and try to get them to open up so they'll be willing to share with you what is going on, all right, for them. Now, one of the questions was, what's the difference between an S and an I? Well, I's are much more interactive outwardly. What happens with the S is they keep more inside, right? So what's going to happen as far as emotions are concerned is the S, it's hard to read their emotions. With the I, the emotions are all over, right? They're in their face, they're in their arms, they're in their body. So it's easy to see that emotionally. Also, I's like to talk, S's like to listen, right? So that's a couple different differences between the I's and the S's. All right, now, another interesting aspect, and you may have seen this in your real estate company where you were in an office, is sometimes what happens with the S's is they gossip. And they talk about things because they can't confront the individual who they're frustrated with or upset with. So what they do is they go to a friend and share their frustration, right? And we typically call that gossiping because what happens is they talk behind people's backs or do things of that nature. Now, not all S's do this, okay, but don't be surprised if they do. So what you want to do is you don't want to confront them, but you want to say, are you feeling upset with what just happened? Can we sit down and talk about this? And sit down with the S and chat with them about what was going on or where they might be feeling upset. Okay? Okay. Here we go. Right. Great. This is the next slide. You're ahead of me this time, Candace. That's awesome. Thank you. All right. So what do we want to do to increase that stress? All right. Deep breath. Reset priorities. All right. You might want to take a personal time out. I remember a friend of mine telling me about one of their daughters, and they used to use the couch in the living room as time out. And then one day, all of a sudden, the wife noticed that this particular daughter was sitting at the couch and basically just sitting there and talking to herself. Her lips were moving, but she wasn't talking out loud. Okay, and she walked over to their daughter and said, "Hey, what are you doing, dear?" And she looked up and says, "Well, Mom, this is where you have me sit when I did something wrong, and you always ask me to think about what it is so I don't do it again. So I decided to sit here because I just did something that I know is wrong, and I'm working it out for myself." Oh my God. Right? That's self-discipline. Wouldn't you like all your kids to be that way? All right. But anyhow, so don't be surprised if what happens with the S is they need to take this time out. Now the D wants to get it done right now, but the S needs to take that time out. So you want to make sure that you take that time out. Okay. All right. Also, what you want to do is you also want to give them specific steps that you're going to be taking. Stephen Covey has these 7 different habits of successful people. And the last one is start with the end in mind. So what you want to do with an S is you want to lay out your program, right? Again, listing presentation, you're going to lay out the program. If you're taking them around and they're buyers, you want to lay out what the program is. You want to get their involvement and ask their input regarding that. So it gives them significant input and ideas regarding what's going on. All right, let's move on to the last of the primary styles, and that is the C, or compliance or conscientiousness. And I just love Jim Parsons as Sheldon in The Big Bang Theory. All right, if you're old, I'll show my age. I used to like Spock too in Star Trek. So what happens with both of these individuals is we have somebody who's very analytical. They're accurate, right? They have a desire to be competent. The other example here that I have is Einstein. Some believe the most brilliant person who ever walked the face of the earth. All right. So what happens is they have these high standards for themselves. They have these high standards for other people. All right. So what's going to happen is when you're interacting with the C, they're going to have these exceedingly high expectations for you, all right? And you might have exceedingly high expectations for the relationship or for them. If that's the case, you want to spell those things out. All right, let's go to the next slide that looks at what stresses a CEO. Okay, well, one of the most prevalent things that stresses a CEO is they have a fear of being wrong. All right, so you have a buyer or a lister, and they've done this many, many times before, and they think they're the expert. All right. Well, if they're an intense C, you don't want to demonstrate that they're not the expert. What you want to do is you want to ask them more specifically, what kind of details would you like them, okay, from you, or what kind of information would they like from you to help them make that decision or deal with it. Okay. All right. Also, what you might want to do is you might want to ask for you might want to talk about rules and directions and specifics, okay? Because they like to have those types of things, right? What else stresses them out is if you require an exact precision, all right? Now, if you have C's working for you and you have a team and you want exactness because you're high demanding yourself, okay, that's going to put additional stress on them. That's going to stress them out. And the last one here is sometimes, especially the D, is going to minimize the C's contribution, and that's going to stress the C out even more because they're working really hard and they're getting frustrated with what's going on. Right, so how does the C behave when they're really under stress? Let's go to the next slide. And what we see is, and these types of things drive D's crazy. Okay, they ask more questions. And here we have a guy who's got his hand up because he's always got questions, right? And they want to get more directions. And sometimes they're just very, very cynical or disagreeable with what's going on. The D wants to move forward. And what's the C do? They start asking questions. They might be somewhat sarcastic, depending on your relationship. All right. And so what happens is there might be some conflicts or disagreements regarding what's happening between the two of them. So there are those types of issues that come up. Okay. Also, the C has a problem with taking action. All right. So they don't like to make those decisions because they have a fear of being wrong. One of the things that you may want to do is instead of asking them to come up with a decision, this is a buyer or seller. Okay. What you want to do is you want to ask them to come up with options, and then you select the right option, or you make the decision. C's like that. They like to have input into the options, but they don't like to take the risk of being wrong. So you want to structure the relationship so they don't have to worry about that risk of being wrong. Okay, all right? And don't be surprised if they won't take action. So here you have a D who's very, very interested in taking action, right? They like movement. And here you have the C that is holding things back by asking questions regarding why are we doing this? Or have you thought about this? Or this data doesn't suggest that you're correct, because the C can be very confrontational, right? So you need to keep those things in mind. Another thing that you're going to see when the C is really stressed out is they have a tendency to procrastinate, right? They'll put things off. They'll go and do things that they really like to do instead. Right, let's go to the next slide, where what can you do to decrease the amount of stress the C is experiencing? Well, what you can do is you can start at the beginning by defining what your expectations are. And ask them to define what their expectations are. Okay, so ask them what are their goals and what are their expectations. Another thing is have them do the detail type stuff. So if this is a buyer or seller, you're going to love this because this is going to save you time. Have them do the search on the internet. Have them spend the time identifying homes that they want to see in a certain area, right? Give them really good sites to go to that they can look at and explore, okay? But at the same time, all right, don't have them necessarily make the decision because they're not going to be willing to do that, but they'll give you options and alternatives. Right, work with them to get those options and alternatives down, and then move from there. Right, And the last thing, what you might want to do is you might want to ask others to help with the tasks that you hate to do if you're an intense C, right? You don't like to interact with other people. So get other people to do those types of tasks for you, right? So that's it, a brief overview of the DIS and C, and I've put it in there for how you can deal with the stress, whether it's you or how you can deal with the stress, whether it's the individual who's the buyer or seller, or if it's your spouse or a friend or one of your kids. All right, Ken, let's go to the next slide. And I just want to show one of my favorite sayings, and this is from Walt Disney, and that is, if you can dream it, you can do it. And the second part of that is, after all, this all started from a little mouse. So one of the things that is important is I gave you a whole bunch of information. You can go back and look at the video. You can contact us. I'll be more than happy to share the slides with you. Okay, and it's really easy to contact me. My email address is just dr.a@abelson, abelson.net. All right, it's also on the slides, so you can see that. All right, but get started. You can do this. You can use this. A lot of you have already taken the DISC. You probably weren't aware how intense it can be. For example, the DISC, most people think it's 4 different behavioral styles. Our particular DISC measures 384 different behavioral styles. So it can be very, very comprehensive, all right? But you got to start somewhere. So think about the person who you visualized in your head for each one of these 4 different areas and start using some of these concepts with them, or think of people that you're working with, or think of people that you're living with and start using some of these concepts with them to help them deal with the stress. If you're an I, you'll love that because it'll help you bond with them. If you're a D, you're going to love that because they're going to start taking direction and making decisions and doing things. If you're an S, you're going to love it because they're going to appreciate you more and you're going to feel warmer inside. Okay. And if you're a C, okay, you're going to love it because you're going to get into the detail of things and show how smart you are in your knowledge base. So these are all things that are really, really useful and helpful. And the last thing I want to do is I want to give everybody an opportunity to take a free DISC, right? And so go to the next slide, Candace, because and take a snapshot of this with your phones, because all you have to do is go to our website, and we actually have a new, it's an abbreviated DISC. It's for you for working at home, which is great for EXP because that's what you do, right? This has been phenomenal. This has been really interesting for me because I mean, this is the first time I've ever had an opportunity of using my avatar right in front of a group like this, and it's really interesting because I'm typically used to being in front of large audiences where I have a chance to interact, with everyone. But in this case, I'm actually seeing everybody, and I'm actually seeing some names of some friends and some people that I've known over the years. So hey, get a hold of me. Let me know how you're doing. It's great to see you in this auditorium here as part of EXP, or a guest of somebody else who's from EXP. And I'm hoping to hear from you. And if we can help you, if I can help you with any of this, I have all kinds of different training that we have. There's all kinds of different things that we can do to help you with. And also, don't forget, stick around for our next session, because the next session we're going to look at how to specifically use these concepts in your listing presentation so you can get just about all of the listings that you want. All right, I'm gonna stop there. Let's see if there's any specific questions. I'm looking at public chat. Whoa.
All right,
Okay.
so everyone, this slide that we've got behind us from Dr. A to take that free DISC assessment, I have PDF that slide and put that in the chat box so that you've got all of that good info to take with you. You can take it to take that assessment. It's going to give you the code and also the instructions to save it. So you'll see it posted there. It says Dr. A PDF. Please take that with you. So glad so many of you love it. And then we'll go ahead and open us up for some Q&A time. So if you've got a question, feel free to ask in the chat box in the bottom left-hand corner or open up your mic.
Okay, there's a question is this nature or nurture? And the real answer is yes. because a lot of people will tell you that somebody's behavioral style is set, okay, and it doesn't change. That's interesting, because if that was true, it would do away with a couple huge professions such as psychiatry and social work, okay, and it would do away with all coaches, because what a coach does is they help you understand what you're like and they help you change your behavior. All right, so part of it is nurture, what we were brought up with, and that's because that's how we learn. Right, these behaviors become somewhat fixed because of what we've watched other people do, but that doesn't mean that you can't change. All right, so yes, you can change, and people do change. In fact, your disc can change. Again, our disc is the most sensitive one in the industry. There's over 30 different discs out there, so it can change from year to year. If you go through some type of significant event for you, your behavior style can change as well. So there's many different reasons why behavior styles, can change or modify. At the same time, some of you have taken the disc several times and it hasn't changed, right? And that's also very common. I'm looking to see if there's other questions. What is the best way to help a C? Oh, let's go back to that. What is the best way? Let me see if I can. Okay. What is the best way you can help a C to get over paralysis by analysis? Great question. All right. One of the things that you can do is to point out that people make mistakes, and the easiest way to do that is to demonstrate where you've made a mistake. All right, and then to help them free up that they can go and make a mistake. But the other option, and I already gave this example, is give them multiple options. Don't put it in the situation where they have to make the final decision. Give them the opportunity to be flexible and do things in a couple different ways. The third thing that you can do, and this is a little bit more difficult because C's typically don't like to talk a lot, but one of the third things that you can do is you can ask them to say, hey, ask me questions, which they do love to do, all right? And so if you have any problems, I mean, when I'm working with our IT people, one of the things that I say is, hey, if you've got a question, when you're redoing the website or you're putting something else in there, don't ruminate over it. Just text me, all right? Or just email me or give me a call on the phone. I do answer my telephone, especially if I see it's you, because I'd rather you call me or interact with me or text me so I can answer your question right away, so you're not worried about it for the next 20 minutes or half an hour or days. Okay, so those are three different ways you can help them deal with the paralysis aspect. Okay, are there other questions? What's the most common personality type? All right. First, I want to say DISC is not a personality profile. DISC is really a behavioral profile, and there's a difference. And one of the reasons most DISC people tell you that it's a personality profile, it's because that's the only assessment they sell, okay? Our personalities are really complicated, and what happens is behaviors are part of it, motives are part of it, stress is part of it, okay? Your leadership characteristics is part of it, your emotional intelligence is part of it. I can go on and on and on. But let me get to your question, okay? What typically we find, and this is a cultural thing because it's different in different cultures, right? Our assessments in 40 different languages, we sell this around the world, okay? But in the US, believe it or not, the S is the most dominant of the 4 different behavioral styles. Okay, so what we're going to do in the next session is what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to have some spreadsheets on how to identify whether the D, an I, or an S, or a C without giving them the assessment. All right, so for sure, stick around for that because that'll really help you. All right, please tell us again how to help the stresses of a C. Of a D. Well, the D needs to feel in control. So one of the things that you want to do is you want to have them feel in control. You might, for example, be with a friend who's driving and you're in a traffic jam. What's the typical response of the D? They can't stand waiting in lines, so they don't want to be there. What they do is they take a side street or they get off the next exit and they figure out how to go somewhere that way because they can't stand still. They always want to move forward. So they always want to feel in control. So the extent to which you can help them feel in control really helps the D get along, all right? And one of the other aspects, if you're both Ds, what you want to do is you want to work something out so they can feel in control while you can feel in control, which is another issue that we can do too. Okay, how does this work with people who are very flexible in their style? All right, if you have somebody, we have a wheel, and if they're close to the center of the wheel, or if you've seen the graphs, okay, and they're all four of their styles aren't that far apart, okay, they're fairly balanced. One of the aspects of with the disc is you can't always identify what somebody's disc is. Okay, so if they're really balanced, then what you want to do is you want to see what they emphasize. Typically, they emphasize one or two of the four different styles more than the other. Okay, and that's what you want to try and go with. Right, but if they're balanced, it's not as near an issue. Okay, I missed the D slide. Oh, people are really having trouble with the slides. So Candace, can you tell them again how they can get all the slides so they can go back and get that? Or you can email me at the dr.a@ableson.net and I'll send it to you too. But Candace, can you help them with that?
Are you comfortable with me providing a PDF of everyone's slides in this chat box today?
In the chat box, yeah.
All right, guys, then let me create a PDF of these slides and I'll put them in the chat box in just a second here. We're going to let Dr. A take a quick break because he will be joining us for the next session. Unless we have any other questions, we'll do a quick last call. I'll do a PDF of these slides and put them in that chat box. And then we'll let Dr. A take a quick break and we will join you again at 12:30 for our next session. Please make sure to take a minute to click on the link provided in the chat box above and to complete that survey as well.